All right, I have with me today Colonel Tony Shaffer. He's been on the show several times. Tony, we've got so many things that we're going to be going over today, from these Pentagon papers that have leaked to what's going on with the United States influence around the world,
Right.
to the Chinese spy programs, and whether the United States is funding the Taliban with taxpayer money. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Good to be here. I always
So,
enjoy conversations.
oh, good, good. Just real quickly, we'll let people know about where they can learn more about you and your radio show at the end. Also, down below, I will put a link to my newsletter and the giveaway that we're doing on our channel this month. But let's jump right into this leaker situation, because I was out of town and all of a sudden, like, my phone started blowing up about this, and now I'm talking to people in Utah, California, Texas. They don't even know what's going on. Like, they're so confused by the way the media is presenting this. So I want to present the truth and what's really going on. So maybe just give like a brief summary of what has happened, and then let's jump into how on earth this young man got access to these papers. Was this leaked on purpose? Is he a patsy? We'll go through all of that. But if you could give our audience just a summary of what's going on with these leaked Pentagon papers.
Yeah, sure. Since roughly, I want to say January, there's the allegation that this kid, this Airman First Class Tessera, was providing via online chat, mostly gamers and things like that, essentially access to what has now been mostly confirmed by the Pentagon and the White House, highly classified information that relates to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the issues relating to CIA's role in some of the issues, actual CIA reports, detailed information relating to disposition of weapons, availability of weapons, all done under the rubric, according to the kid, of just, basically having bragging rights that he had access to all this information. And what's notable in all of this is that the kid is very young, 21 years old. Apparently, by most accounts which have been confirmed, he did have a top secret SCI clearance. That's not the highest clearance, despite what people seem to think, Stephen. It's a pretty high clearance. It does get you in the door for a lot of what we call compartmented programs. And their compartmented programs are not the same as special access programs necessarily. SAPs, black operations, there's a distinction with a difference. SCI, special compartmented information, essentially is a caveat that indicates that you can have access to signals intelligence, things that are derived from NSA and things like that. So by all accounts, this kid had extensive access to information based on his status as an Airman First Class. That status is based on him being a member of an Air Force Reserve Unit. The Air Force Reserve Unit is in Massachusetts. It is under investigation itself at this point because, how did this kid, who's a reservist, not an active duty member of the Air Force, get access to information that was prepared and presented at the chairman of the Joint Chiefs level, which is very high. Probably the term is the tank for when the Joint Chiefs meet. They meet in the tank. It's a very small, it's a not small room, it's fairly large, but it's basically a secure facility within a secure facility where they talk about things like this. So those slides, some of those slides were prepared for that level briefing, as well as the CIA report. So the fact that you have this kid who had extensive access via his Air Force Reserve status has raised a lot of issues. And so that's the situation, as I understand it, Stephen, is that the kid somehow got these things, shared them inappropriately, illegally with his friends online. And that's how it all started. And again, this happened from essentially January up until last month, where he was sharing this stuff slide by slide in many cases with the folks online.
Okay. So just like imagine it's like organizational chart. Let's just call it a pyramid to make it really easy. We have President Biden, chief of the military at the top. Are the Joint Chiefs right below the president?
So no, it's the SecDef. So basically, it's when you've got the government infrastructure right below the president is the cabinet. One of the cabinet positions is the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense is the civilian leader of the Pentagon. All elements of the Pentagon respond to the SecDef. Essentially, it's civilian leadership as required by the Constitution. Below the Secretary of Defense are the combatant commanders, Central Command, PACOM, all those other elements which actually do respond to him as the civilian leader. The Joint Chiefs of Staff we call them the Imperial Staff for any number of reasons, because they're the ones who are the brainstem. They're the ones who actually do the orders, they do the coordination. They essentially are the senior advisors to the president. So the chairman of the Joint Chiefs does report to the president, but he's not in the chain of command. And that's a bit of a peculiarity, but it seems to work. And, I've known a number of these guys. I've been friends with them. I've had to brief them. And I've actually advised at least one directly. And so these guys are the senior advisors to the president. They will walk in and say, Mr. President, these are the 5 things you can and cannot do. The Joint Staff does cut orders. That is to say that once the Secretary of Defense makes a decision, the Joint Staff carries it out. And that's the way it works. So these briefing slides, Stephen, were prepared for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Space Command. Some of the other government agencies are represented there in the Pentagon. The Coast Guard, while not a member of DoD, is represented at the Pentagon. So anyway, so those slides came from that level, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs level.
Okay, so this would have been stuff that like Lloyd Austin and General Mark Milley, this is the stuff they're being briefed on.
Absolutely.
And then way down the chain of command is this 21-year-old National Guard young man. How on earth does somebody like that, and this isn't digital from what I understand, these are like paper artifacts.
That's correct. That's correct.
That General Milley probably, looked at with his own eyes. How on earth could somebody get access to that? That's what the investigation in Massachusetts is?
Right. Well, there's multiple investigations, but yes, once Mark Milley got past his white rage of trying to figure out why he was upset, he probably looked at these slides at some point. That's a joke, by the way. Just saying. But I'm just a little bit of just jesting with you, Mark, if you're watching, which he normally does. Anyway, the FBI took the lead for whatever bizarre reason.
Okay.
This is where there's a real red flag, a huge red flag, because every service element of the Pentagon has its own counterintelligence and law enforcement capacity. Army has both CID and MPI. Those are the criminal investigative units. MPI that does the more hefty stuff. And then Army has counterintelligence separate from law enforcement, but it does. I started off as an Army counterintelligence special agent. You are a special agent. You have arrest authorities and everything. You are a sworn officer. So Air Force has Air Force OSI, which does both the criminal and counterintelligence mission. And again, Air Force OSI would have been the logical and necessary lead in this investigation, since he's an airman in the Air Force Reserve. But somehow they threw all the rules out the window and decided to bring in the FBI. Now, I can tell you for a fact that there is the investigation going on of the automated systems where they're saying this kid got the slides from. That's going to be handled by the Air Force internally. The Air Force, I can tell you for a fact, without knowing details. I've not been told anything, but I know how it works. The Air Force is not going to give anybody access to its automated systems internally. So the Air Force, probably OSI, is taking the lead on that. But overall, there's probably 3 investigations ongoing right now. The FBI one regarding the sharing of information, the Air Force OSI one looking at automated systems, how things were transferred, and then a third one probably having to do with the individual's security clearance, how he got his clearance, what vetting he went through, and things like that. And that would be handled probably by Defense Security Service, by someone at the clearance level, because I suspect his clearance has been suspended, just saying, and that they're going through a number of issues right now trying to figure out how this kid was able to do what he did. And by the way, let me remind everybody here that well, this is important. It ain't the critical factor. The critical factor here, in my judgment, is those slides, which have been confirmed as authentic by the Pentagon and the White House, showed that the senior Pentagon officials and the White House officials lied to the American public. And we have to focus on that as a key issue of knowledge that came through this. So
yeah, that brings me to my next question. So I follow a lot of podcasts. I read a lot, watch other shows. It's been insinuated by other top retired military people that perhaps General Milley or the White House could have leaked this information through a patsy in order to secure more money for the Ukraine-Russia war, or to start laying down the off-ramp to get out of this war without making Biden look bad. Have you heard anything like that?
Well, both could be true, by the way. They aren't mutually exclusive. And yes, I think it's very clear at this point, Stephen, that those slides, there's just no logical, like, we started A with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and we're down here at Z somehow without understanding how we got to Z. There's the void between this kid and where these slides started out at. So you got to, like, who benefits? Who benefits here? Well, the administration benefits by the fact that they can put the FBI in to investigate and control that. I think that's why the FBI is in charge. They're going to control the outcome of the investigation. They're not trying to. It's not a truth seeking. It's a narrative forming investigation. That's what's going on. So then, if that's the case, which I do believe, if you use that as the premise, which I'm going from, what are they doing? And they're trying to do one of two things, saying, yes, oh my goodness, we had to lie to you because the truth was really bad, but we need more money. Or the other thing is, we need more money and we need to look for a way out, because both can be true in Washington. You can be looking for a door out and still want more money. As a matter of fact, they always want more money, Stephen. I'm just telling you, that's the way it works. So the benefit, the folks who benefit the most from this, not even the Russians. The Russians don't benefit from this. The Russians probably knew at least 90% of what's in there. It was top secret because of where it was briefed and who it was briefed to. And remember, you and I talked about this before all this hit. We've been talking commonly about the fact that the Russians are winning, the Ukrainians are not. Weapon systems are being depleted. There's probably boots on the ground. All these things have been talked about. So there's no real loss of intel here. It's more about now the public has got confirmation of what we've been saying. So again, that helps circle the square with the administrations. Like, yeah, it's bad. But that it gives them the off ramp then if they choose to take it, or ask for more money if they choose to take it. So I think there's pretty ample evidence that there was a narrative here being formed more than an accidental leak at this point.
Yeah, I mean, my show can reach 500,000 to a couple million people. That's a drop in the bucket. But when this stuff leaks and ABC News, CBS, MSNBC, Fox News, they start pumping this out, that's when I can see the White House really panicking. Now, could this be, I mean, these documents are too old to be from Mar-a-Lago or Joe Biden's garage. They're maybe back to like January, but is there any chance that this is like a Clinton situation where somebody stuffed these down their pants or in a sock and got them out of that room and then leaked the paper artifact?
If you look at the artifacts, Stephen, they look like they've been folded. So yeah, again, that's why there's this huge void here. It's like, how did this kid wind up with hard copies? Remember, one of the lessons from the Manning, when Private Manning leaked all the stuff to WikiLeaks, there was indications that they had turned off on the ports of computers those things which are supposed to monitor printing or transfer of large caches of data. So basically, within the government computer systems, especially the closed systems, there's monitoring software which always records or alerts people if data is being moved, if big data, a briefing slide being moved somewhere it's not supposed to. Somehow that didn't happen. There was no alerts because they fixed it after Bradley Manning. So if that didn't happen on an automated system, which I don't think it did, we don't know this yet because nobody's talking, the Air Force is investigating, that means somehow a hard copies had to be gotten of these documents and moved out of the Pentagon or some other secure facility. That's where the mystery is. And that's where we have to look because, again, it looks like the kid took these things, took photographs of hard copies. I want to know where the hard copies are right now, for example. Have they found the hard copies? That's an important thing to ask and answer. Nobody seems to be concerned about that. So again, I think it's more about now controlling the narrative than trying to present the public with accurate information about what happened.
Okay. You know, one of the things that's been just a little bit redeeming for me is, you know, I cover this stuff and I've been called a Putin sympathizer, a Ukraine hater. It's like, I don't have a dog in this fight. Breaks my heart to see all the human carnage. But one of the things that my guests have said, like Scott Ritter, like Colonel Douglas Macgregor, yourself, is that Ukraine is being hit at a rate significantly higher than Russia. And the mainstream media has been flipping that. And now these documents show that there's about 7 Ukrainian deaths for every 1 Russian. Right. And so do you believe that that is accurate information? Or do you think that they are leaking out what they want the public to see?
Well, both sides are engaged in this. So, I mean, look, I can go on my Twitter feed and I know for a fact that the Russians monitor it. I know the Ukrainians monitor it. It's really ironic you say that the Ukrainian bots and trolls are way more active and aggressive than the Russian ones. The Russian ones are very passive right now. They're just watching. But Ukraine, to your point, it's like anybody who says anything critical about Ukraine, oh, you're a Russian sympathizer, like, you know, you're a knucklehead. As I've said before, Stephen, for the record, I would no more take a side if a yeast infection was fighting fungus. You know, that's why it's like I'm not involved. I don't want to be involved. And that's why I look at Ukraine and Russia. You know, it's not our issue. With that said, to not practically understand what's going on is a disservice to our country. As an intelligence officer, it's like, look, my job is to understand. You may not like what I'm going to say, but this is my interpretation of facts. And if you don't like the facts, you're welcome to challenge the facts, but I don't think you're going to get very far. And in this case, the fact is that, as we've talked about, Stephen, before the documents came out, the Russians were probably winning. The Russians have the numbers. I've said it's all about numbers at this point. It has no emotion. It's just, if you look at the numbers of what's available regarding combat power, regarding troops, military weapon systems, from missiles to tanks, the numbers are all in favor of Russia. That's it. That's the bottom line. And these briefing slides confirm that up to date, the Russians have been allowing the Ukrainians to throw uselessly all the troops into Bakhmut. It's like, why would you want to go on the offensive? Why would the Russians want to go on the offensive if you can attrit your enemy by letting him come to you and killing them? That's what I've been saying. And that apparently is what has been confirmed by the slides. And again, I'm not pro-Russian. I'm simply reporting to your audience and to other folks I talk to. It's like, this is what's going on. I don't care if you like it or not. That's what's going on. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so these documents began to surface on Discord among this gaming group in January. Since then, General Milley and General Lloyd Austin have testified before Senate committee hearings that Ukraine was winning, that they had a chance of winning, that there's all this Russian disinformation. Now they have all this egg on their face. Everything they said is the opposite of what they've been reading in these private meetings or skiffs. So how do the American people reconcile with the fact that they're privately saying one thing and then they're publicly saying another? These lies, I think it's illegal to lie to the Senate and before Congress under oath.
So yes, to answer your question, the bottom line up front, yeah. So to me, in my judgment, based on my experience, both gentlemen, both Secretary Austin, General Austin, and General Milley have made what I would term false official statements. That is to say, if they were not under oath, which I think they were, if they're just making a statement in their official position, which they know is a lie, it's a false official statement. That is, prosecutable under the UCMJ, by the way. They have, it's not that hard to prove. Either you said something false or you didn't, and in this case, it's pretty easy to prove. Secondly, it is a felony. It is a perjury to lie to Congress, and that is something different. And but they don't think there's going to be any consequences because Jim Clapper did it multiple times, at least twice by my count. You had Obama officials come in and sit down and lie. Stephen, I've been in a room where a senior executive service guy, we'll just call him Bill H. We won't give any names out specifically here, where he directed members of his staff who are going to go testify to lie, directly lie. It's like, just don't tell them the truth. So the DIA guy, by the way, just if you're listening, Bill, these things happen all the time and there's no consequences because nobody seems to care. So they lied about Iraq. They lied about Afghanistan, especially Afghanistan. We're just having hearings today on some of this stuff. I know for a fact my friend Danny Davis came out. Lieutenant Colonel Davis was another whistleblower and came, and I was part of his whistleblowing. I was in the rooms trying to help him get through, navigate that. He flat out said that all the progress in Afghanistan, this is 10 years ago, all the progress in Afghanistan that was being reported to Congress was a complete sham. It was. It was, as if we didn't need the evidence of the complete collapse to go along with what he said. And yet he was the enemy. Oh, no. We can't have these people coming and telling the truth. You have to go with the lie. And senior officers at this point are politicians in uniform. Anybody who wears the uniform and who's a four-star, with very few exceptions, are dedicated to the narrative that's put forth by the political leadership of the nation, rather than being true to their oath of office and the Constitution. And that's what I saw with Milley and Austin.
So they're loyal to the office versus the Constitution.
They're loyal to the political party who's in office rather than the Constitution, which I find very dangerous. So, but remember, for your audience, remember, I was a whistleblower against the Bush 43 White House, and I'm a Republican. Just saying.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. Let's come back home for a minute. There's a lot of people concerned about the millions of people pouring in to our country, some through the northern border, mostly through the southern border. Mm-hmm. Just this week, under oath, Alejandro Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security said, no concern about the number coming in and no concern about terrorists or dangerous people. This has to be a complete lie, because even I, as a public person with no background, have read the reports of how many gang members they are capturing, repeat offenders, terrorists, people coming up from the military and other countries that hate the United States. Is this a flat out lie from Mayorkas?
From my experience, absolutely. So as your audience may or may not remember, I am still a member of law enforcement in the state of Virginia. I actually am the Homeland Security Advisor to Sheriff Dave Decatur in Stafford County, Virginia. That's a county just south of Quantico. If you're on 95 going north, the traffic in this county is always the worst. You go through Fredericksburg, you're guaranteed to hit a traffic jam, just saying. And I with all due respect to the county, it's not their fault, but it's still tough. Anyway, point being is that I do work to advise and assist David and his department regarding the spectrum of Homeland Security issues, which means I do still advise and work on intelligence issues. And I can tell you for a fact, Stephen, that every day there are reports coming out regarding threats that have been created by the open border. Some of these reports have to do with terrorist organizations, and they're from DHS. So I don't know what Mayorkas is saying, but his statement is one of opinion, not of fact. And I think it's a political opinion that others who were questioning him were, I think, shocked by his answer, because we all know, we who live in the real world, who have to read and deal with these issues, read about these issues and deal with them, recognize that the open border is only contributing to allowing for foreign nations to get their intelligence folks in, to get folks who could commit terrorist acts in. And most importantly, in many ways, just the overall allowing for fentanyl to come in as a weapon of mass destruction that continues to touch every single community in the nation. So with all those things on the table, there's no doubt that there's a Homeland Security threat that the open borders has created and continues to make worse. It's going to get worse when Title 42 expires here in about, I guess, less than a month now at this point. So
Yeah, yeah, I worry about that as well. I'll be very honest. I have very limited life experience. I'm on the younger side, but it does seem that the United States is rapidly losing influence and power around the globe under the Biden administration.
Right.
In just the last few days, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that he will align with China on military issues, including if China decides to invade Taiwan, they
Right.
will remain neutral and they will not side with their NATO partner, the United States. What
Right.
is going on with American power and influence right now under the Biden administration?
Two things I think are apparent. The the world the world leader, for the better for worse, was the United States after World War II. We came out on top. So from 1945 on, we've been the ones who've kind of helped dominate and shape the global order of things, the rules-based system which everybody talks about. There's been challenges to it, but nothing serious. And every administration, Democrat and Republican, always seem to recognize the importance of that role. Let me be very clear for you and your audience. I am not a neocon. I have never believed that the use of military force should be our first option. With that said, the power of diplomacy and engagement was something that we used very effectively. And I'm a Reagan guy. I'm a Reagan Republican. I do believe that we should always talk first and have weapons available if we need them, but we should always lead with diplomacy. And the idea, like we did with winning the Cold War, it was all about economics, being able to convince the Russians you could do something that you couldn't with SDI. At the same time, engage them on the moral high ground. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, and putting immense pressure on them through the international community. We've lost that. We've lost the ability to understand and work in three dimensions in that way. Instead, we've seen in the Obama administration first, and now expanded through the Biden administration, this over-reliance on military use of force. I mean, it's amazing how the Democrats are ready to go to guns instantly the moment something happens. It's kind of like, you guys are the ones who always talk about peace, but somehow we're the ones who negotiate and get big old nuclear agreements in place, START, INF, all this. We do that. We know the Republicans, the conservatives do it. It's always funny how they talk a great game, but they do the opposite when they're in power. And this is another example of that. And, again, instead of showing strength regarding Putin, Stephen, one of the first things Biden said when he was confronted with the potential of a incursion, oh, well, if they just take a little, we're not that worried about it. I mean, how do you not see that doing the same thing during 1950 resulted in, oh, we're not worried about Korea. Okay, there goes the North Koreans in the South. Oh, April Gladsby, what was her name? Ambassador Gladsby, I think her name was, with Saddam Hussein. Oh, Saddam tells her he wants to invade Kuwait. Oh, that's okay. The moment you open the door to those who wish to use military force and their nation's power to obtain their national objectives, they're going to do it if they think they can get away with it. That's what happened. So the moment Biden opened that door, Putin ran through it. And that's what the danger is now. So, I think Reagan and others understood. They were very clear on what the policies were, what we were willing to do and not do. And we didn't tell them the consequences. We said there would be consequences. And those consequences often happened after the fact. And while they were not necessarily publicly revealed, the people who we did them to knew we did it to them. I'm just saying, that's clandestine stuff sometimes works, just saying. And I think that was a method that seemed to work to maintain prestige. At this point, Stephen, there's no belief that Joe Biden or this administration has any ability to be able to manage a diplomatic or engagement process which is required to resolve issues. Nobody believes Biden or Tony Blinken has the ability to sit down and resolve things with Russia. Tony Blinken with Victoria Nuland have become proxy, basically trying to get the United States into a war with Russia. They have said everything they could to say basically we're in it with Russia. So there's no diplomacy there if your diplomats have signed aboard with what the Russians think to be the enemies. China too. China's looking for friends and family in the global world, and they're finding them. Macron crossed over. He's went to the dark side, And I think you're going to see more and more of that because, and by the way, there's going to be no consequences for him doing it. Now the Biden folks say, oh, it's a shame he says this, but they're going to do nothing to basically say, well, Macron has made a mistake. While we don't agree with what he's doing, there will be consequences for the fact that he's signing a board to actually allow China, the PRC, to undermine a democracy. Well, that should be the first thing we say.
Do you think this situation with Macron goes back to Biden's first year, where he basically told France that they would be a part of this submarine deal with France and Australia and one other country, and then all of a sudden Joe Biden just cut France, one of our greatest allies, out of the submarine?
I'm sure.
Planted the seeds of. Okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it has a lot to do with that, Steve. Stephen, the thing is, though, we have alienated every single NATO ally, and that's one of the ones we've done. So yeah, there was no reason to do that. Why would you do that? The Chinese see opportunity like that, and I'm sure that they've been reminded. The French have been reminded by the Chinese, hey, they screwed you, man. It sucks to be you. I'm sure it's more diplomatic than what I just said, but the idea here is that, of course, the Chinese are going to leverage this and say, well, come over and work with us. We're not going to do that sort of thing to you.
Yeah, and so they're going to do the same thing to Germany. Hey, look at what Biden did to your pipeline.
I do believe Seymour Hersh is correct. Seymour Hersh reported on two key things recently, that Zelenskyy took, and his thugs took, about $400 million. I think it's true. I think it's very true. And Biden himself said he was going to destroy the Nord Stream. I don't know why people have a hard time believing Seymour Hersh, but I tend to believe Cy is correct on this. That the other thing, this whole yacht, people on a yacht did it. No, you people on a yacht don't have that level of technology to dive. Even it's not that deep, but you have to go down and be well at the bottom of the water there to put things on that thing and be accurate about it. So I don't, but yeah, it's the more Biden shows weakness by not facing adversaries and then alienating allies, the more our prestige and ability to manage things is diminished.
Let's talk about Cy Hersh, and then I want to go back to China. So sure. Cy Hersh is one of the most reputable journalists, former New York Times journalists back when they were, very reputable. He's the one that said, I have high-level intel that Biden was behind blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. He's now come out and said that they have access to CIA documents where the government knows for a fact high-level people in the Ukrainian government have pilfered or stolen or siphoned off, whatever word you want to use, $400 million of American taxpayer money. They even have a list of the worst people that have stolen money from us. And President Zelenskyy and his family are on that list. Right. And yet we continue to hold him up as this Winston Churchill hero of this war. It appears he is stealing money from the American people.
He is. And let me again remind your audience that before 1991, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. The Ukrainian leaders are cut from the same cloth, literally, as the Soviet Union. They took a big bolt of Soviet cloth and they cut it into pieces. And some of those went to Russia. Some of those went to Ukraine. It's all the same. They're oligarchs. They're all corrupt. And by the way, Stephen, as you recall, before 2014, everybody recognized how corrupt Ukraine was. Somehow things changed when we helped do a color revolution. Oh, it's okay now. But nothing has changed. So the fact that Zelenskyy and his folks took the bribe, just like Putin's folks did. Putin, one of the reasons the Russians failed so miserably last year in the invasion, because of bribery, because of graft, because of all these things that undermined the military in Russia from being effective, because of all the cronyism. Same thing in Ukraine. So I get really fed up when to your point, that we're trying to lionize Zelenskyy. No, they're all thugs. They're all they're all supported by oligarchs. They're literally two sides of the same coin. So I don't see why anybody should be surprised by this, but I'm surprised that there's not more of a response to say, shut it off. This is nonsense. It's not our job to enrich them. This is not the only enrichment. We've actually put money in the budget, Stephen, for us to pay their civil service in Ukraine. Are you kidding me? We've got people here struggling with the economy. All these things that could be used here domestically to help real people, U.S. citizens with these sorts of things. and it's being diverted over to these corrupt oligarchs on the Ukrainian side. So I just hope people will wake up and recognize Zelenskyy is no different than Putin. He just has a different color flag on his lapel.
Yeah. Okay. Last topic, and then I'll let you go. I know how busy you are. So going back to China and the threat that they're making, it's not militarily, but it's financially and also this diplomacy. They are getting really good at diplomacy, right? The United States doesn't want anything to do with communicating with Russia or brokering a peace deal. So now China's stepping in saying, we want peace, right? Then we find out last week that Saudi Arabia and Iran, mortal enemies against each other and the United States, except for the petrodollar and all the money that we give them, they're using China to broker peace between them. And then last night, top government officials in Israel said, we have been shunned by the United States and President Joseph Robinette Biden, and we will turn to China to help broker peace between Israel and Iran. Is China going to just continue to do more diplomacy than the United States and win friends? It's like they finally opened the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and now they're kicking our butt when it comes to diplomacy around the globe.
So they've been using, the Chinese PRC have been using something called soft power for a while. It was kind of ham-handed. It was kind of like they would go into third world nations, African nations, offer to build infrastructure and buy politicians. It worked pretty well. People, want money, and that they've refined that model significantly at the global level now, and it's much more effective. They've been able to compromise, I would argue, Biden. Biden is compromised by them via Hunter, and most importantly, to your point, the progressive left doesn't like religion to begin with. They don't like the Israelis. They don't believe that the Israelis are the chosen people. I'm not here to judge that. I'm just saying what appears to me to be the policy. The policy is of the left to hate all religion, to just hate, and they hate democracy, and they don't like the Israelis. So the Israelis have figured it out. It's like, yeah, they're not going to help us. They're not, all the things that Trump did to help them, moving the capital, moving the embassy to the capital in Jerusalem, all these things that Trump did to support and enhance that, the Abraham Accords. We gave the basic idea, Stephen, to Mike Flynn to give to Trump in 2016 regarding the Abraham Accords. We basically proposed an Arab NATO that would have both a military and civilian proponent, and they took that and ran with it. They expanded it. It worked pretty darn good. Well, that's all gone, and the Democrats and progressives don't want to deal with it. So nature abhors a vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and that vacuum exists until China stepped in to fill it. Those nations don't necessarily want a war. They don't want to be at war. I think both sides in the Saudi-Iran tension want to have an off-ramp. Well, the Chinese come in and offer them off-ramp. The Israelis want to be engaged and don't want to be attacked by Middle Eastern countries. Well, if the United States can't come in and help that, the Chinese will. Russia's been engaged heavily with Egypt. They've been selling Egypt weapons because we wouldn't do it because, Egypt. Al-Sisi, who's, by the way, an Army War College graduate, geez, we don't like the fact that he came to power because he stopped the Muslim Brotherhood guy. Well, he did the right thing. But anyway, so the compounding of bad decisions has resulted in the United States being marginalized and the Chinese stepping into the limelight. And the only thing the Chinese have to do is not blow it. They don't have to be great at it. They just have to just be good enough and not blow it. And that's what they're doing right now. So,
right. Colonel Tony Shaffer, thank you so much for being on today's show. If people want to learn more about you and your radio program, where can they learn more?
So we are on the America Out Loud Talk Radio Network and their podcast. The show's called The Hard Truth. You can also get copies or the actual broadcast of the show and the video that goes with it on our projectsentinel.net website. Project Sentinel is the organization, one of the two organizations I run, as well as londoncenter.org, which is the policy think tank which I run, which is based in Manhattan. So they can check out what we're doing on the full spectrum of policy issues. So, Stephen, I always appreciate the time and opportunity to speak to your audience, and I appreciate the the comprehensive nature of your questions, because it allows me to explain things in more detail. So thanks for having me again here on your show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And we will have you on again. I want to talk a little bit more about climate change.
Oh, great.
Marxism, and a few other topics, but we'll do that on another day. Thank you again for being on our show.
Thank you.